So that was amazing. Great information, Bernard. I have, it's always nice when I can follow someone where I can actually say, as Bernard pointed out. So I have several things here that I thought it would be fun to talk about. So I was going to go over a bit of the change and looking at it from a global perspective, sharing a little bit of information from the Burson by Deloitte 2017 Global HR Trends. People familiar with that? I was able to pull actually some specific data for Australia from that, which I think is really interesting. So I'll jump into this. One of the things that I find fascinating that's going on right now is the rate of change that is happening in our world. So Bernard was talking about all the changes that were going on when we looked at that slide that went from 1961 all the way up to June of 2017. One of the things that was going on in organizations, if you think about organizational structures, Bernard was just hitting on the fact of this hierarchy, and perhaps that would be something that we go back to. But in the 60s through the 80s, the hierarchies in an organization and how employees were viewed is very different than it is today. So when you think back to the 60s, 70s, the 80s, managers of people and how people were viewed in an organization were much more expendable. You could be replaced. Your talent was probably something that anybody else could have. And this was more about the Industrial Revolution. As we move into the 90s, we started seeing this shift to this more knowledge-based or knowledge worker, and the changes that created in organizations, where we started seeing more of this development of teams and group team activities, working in teams to get work done, and managing people had to shift more to this idea of coaching and mentoring. And then you move into where we are today. And organizations like Google, for example, which I find fascinating, the average manager in Google has 50 employees reporting to them. So imagine the amount of work that would be required if you didn't shift how you manage people. If you have 50 people reporting to you, that is a massive number. When you think about just things about like doing, okay, how am I going to do the performance reviews for 50 people? All of that has to change. And I think that the biggest disruptor that we're seeing, how it ties into this slide, is how technology is changing. And what's happening with technology and how that's leading how we're looking at what we're capable or what we're able to do. Bernard hit on the idea of the secretaries being replaced by the fact that executives have learned to type, and we have a lot more of this information that we don't depend on someone to pull together for us as we did with from a secretary's perspective. But we do have the need for executive assistants to organize our lives, to organize our schedules, to do all of to actually make sure we have everything we need to be able to get the job done. The changes that we've seen to technology, and what I find fascinating about the research from Burson, was that individuals, as you can see from this slide, are much more likely to pick up on new technology. Businesses are less likely to pick up on new technologies as they come out, or are more gun-shy about it. And when you think about it, you can see where that might be coming from when we think about things like these major learning management systems that were put in place. Many organizations felt burned by them. They weren't able to actually figure out, how do I actually make use of this? I have this behemoth system now, and I'm trying to fit all these other bits and pieces into it. It doesn't really work the way I want it to. So businesses are actually not as willing to pick up on new technology as it comes out. And then you look at public policy, and public policy even falls further behind on that. So public policy will actually try to put things in place to actually block disruptors in technology. I used Uber as an example. I think London is right now saying that they were not going to allow Uber in London, for example. But that's a disruptive technology, and that's how public policy is impacting or not embracing what new technology is coming out. So when I was thinking about this information, when you think about what's important to executives, this is where you can start seeing, how do I manage the organization for the future, is one of the key and one of the most important things that executives reported as being on the top of their list, what keeps them awake at night, followed by career and learning and talent acquisition, okay? And so what I thought would be interesting is to look at what is it that you actually have to have in this organization of the future. You have to be able to do things differently. You have to be able to engage employees differently. What employees are looking for from an organization. We heard about millennials. Bernard was talking about that. They want a different opportunity. They want self-learning. They want to constantly be learning. How are we doing that? How are we managing that? How are managers being trained up, leaders being trained up to be able to manage people this way? And this is what is one of the things that's really important. These top three are really important to executives at this point. So I'm going to focus on these three areas. We're just going to take a look at these three areas, and I thought what I would do is just share a little bit about, even from our own perspective at CPP, what are the things that we're doing to try to help organizations that we're working with address some of these concerns. So I'm going to start with the third one, which is on talent acquisition. So 70% of Australian respondents rated this trend as important or very important. Okay? So it's important, it's up there. Some of the things, this is one of the things that I was thinking about for CPP. When we're looking at some of the changes that have been going on in our organization, one of the things that I put in place for our organization was creating what I called CPP iLabs. And it was a group of people that actually worked outside the company. I didn't want them to be in any way constrained by what was going on in the organization. And it's not that there's something bad going on in our organization. It's just that inside our organization, there is a structure, there is a process and a procedure and policies in place as to how we work. I wanted to have a group of people who kind of worked outside of that. And one of the things that they started focusing on was around this whole talent acquisition was this idea of actually building the workforce of tomorrow and taking some of the assessment work that we have, the assessments we have in our organization, and looking at them a little bit differently and creating opportunities where we can work with institutions and organizations to help educate the students actually as they're learning and developing, to make sure that they have the skills when they come into organizations to actually be able to address the needs of the organization. And I think it hits on their ability to be able, how can we help them understand how they need to be more agile in what they do? This whole idea of the role that you go into an organization today is probably going to be either it's not going to exist when you get through school, or it's going to be very different than you thought it was going to be once you get through school. So how do we help the students actually be able to be more resilient and be more agile? And what can we put in place to help partner up with the institutions and the organizations so that we're clear about what it is that they're going to be needing for the future, and are we developing the employee groups, the employees and the students coming into organizations so that they can enter into these entry-level positions with meeting the needs of what the organizations are identifying. So this is something that we put together, and we had this student success profile that we created, which was all around not only what are your interests, but what are you going to need to be able to do to be able to achieve those interests. So we used the strong interest inventory, and we used something called the California Psychological Inventory, and we said, okay, if we put these together, we can actually put together a package of here's what you're interested in doing, here's what it's going to take for you to be able to achieve that, here's what organizations are looking for, and these are the areas where you're likely or potentially could have some challenges. And here's how we can help you get through some of those challenges. And this is something that came out of this Innovations Lab group that we did, but it directly addresses this idea of this whole talent acquisition. The next area that I wanted to talk about is this whole career and learning. So 78% of Australian respondents rated this as important or very important. And this is all about how are we helping people learn. It's all about this self-paced individual learning. So the expectation of employees coming into an organization is that they're going to be able to learn new skills. They're going to be able to learn from being in here. They won't be staying at jobs as long as other generations have, because they're going to be wanting to have new skills and developing new skills, and find that they either get them in the organizations that they're in or they will go elsewhere to get it. So it's all about being able to have self-paced learning and developing the whole virtual team-based sessions so you can actually work effectively as teams. And so one of the things that we're doing as an organization is our whole online platform that we have had out for many years, we have completely revamped it. And we're in the process now of putting it out. It's called Elevate, which is on here. But it's going to have, not in addition to actually how you take the assessments that we offer, it's going to be more about what's the additional learnings that are there. What are the additional opportunities for this self-paced learning that we can help make sure is available to the organization? And how can we help practitioners be able to get this into the organizations that they're working with? So this is going to be an important shift, I think, from a platform perspective. The other area that we're looking at as an organization is how do we create more comprehensive solutions? So in addition to taking the assessments that we have, like the MBTI, how do we put that together in a more comprehensive package for practitioners to better engage end users, not only in the experience and the trainings that they go through the sessions that you put on, but also what happens after that. How do we keep you engaged? How do we keep the end user learning more? How do we keep this information that they've taken, this knowledge they have about themselves, how do you keep that learning going? So what we're putting together is these more comprehensive packages or offerings that address not only how to best present and use the offerings that we have, but also how do you keep people engaged in that long term so that it goes on not just for the training event, that the training event just becomes one step in an ongoing process. Okay? And the last one that is this whole idea of the organization of the future. So 84% of Australian respondents rated this trend as important or very important. I think the most important thing on this slide is, but only 11% believe they know how to build the organization of the future. So I think for all of us who are in the learning and development, training and development arena, it creates a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to help organizations, to help employees, to be able to be more agile in their organizations and help the organizations get prepared to take on the future. Because obviously from here, they actually need quite a bit of help, and they believe that they need quite a bit of help. So I really think the ability to be able to help employees be more resilient and more agile has never been more important than it is right now. And I think it creates a great opportunity as well as a great challenge for all of us to make sure that we can help organizations respond to this.